My dad threw a stack of eviction papers onto the kitchen table and sneered, "You're useless. Be gone by tomorrow morning. This place belongs to your brother now." I didn't argue. I grabbed my keys and walked out with a calm smile. But the second my brother stepped through that front door, my dad realized he hadn't just kicked me out, he'd triggered a chain reaction that would destroy everything he thought he controlled. Can you imagine your own father looking you dead in the eye, throwing eviction papers on the table, and telling you, "You're useless. This place belongs to your brother now. Be gone by morning"? That was my dad, just a few months ago. What they thought was my utter ruin. It became the fire that forged me into someone they never saw coming. This isn't just a story about losing a house, it's about betrayal so deep it almost broke me, and a fight for self-respect that changed everything. It all started last night. My entire world imploded, not with a bang, but with the cold, calculated cruelty of my own family. I'm Alex, I'm 28, and I was just sitting there in the kitchen, laptop open, scrolling through job postings, when Robert, my dad, burst in. No warning. "No, son, we need to talk." Just a thick envelope of papers slapped down on the table so hard my coffee almost tipped over. "You're a failure," he spat, his voice like ice. "You have 12 hours to get out. Your brother owns this house now." I just sat there, frozen. The papers blurred. Eviction papers. Signed, notarized, ready to go. Now, I'm used to my dad's outbursts. His belief that your worth is measured in paychecks and fancy titles. But this? This wasn't some casual insult. This was planned. Deliberate. He looked almost proud watching me read them. "Maybe this will finally teach you some responsibility," he sneered. This house wasn't just four walls to me. It was my childhood. Mom's favorite curtains still hung in the living room. David, my older brother, and we built a treehouse in the backyard, carved our initials into the old oak. This was my sanctuary, and now I had less than half a day to leave it. My voice was shaky when I finally asked, "Why?" Dad just smirked. "Your brother just bought it from me. He's the owner. Consider this a lesson in what happens when you waste your life." See, David has always been the golden child. Straight A's, star athlete, first with a master's degree. If David sneezed, Dad would act like he'd cured the common cold. Me? I was the quieter one, the kid who drew instead of playing football. I got decent grades, but I never shone. After college, I bounced between jobs, trying to find my path. For Dad, that was apparently the ultimate sin. I should have been angry right away, and I was. But what hit me first was this strange, hollow feeling, like my chest had been scooped out. I thought of all the times I'd stayed late helping Dad with repairs. The birthdays, the holidays under this roof. The nights I'd crashed on the couch after long shifts, trying not to wake anyone. None of it mattered. I was just expendable. David wasn't even there. He'd been living with his girlfriend Chloe downtown for months. But as Dad put it, he'd swooped in at the perfect time. I could already picture his smug grin, knowing he had the power to kick me out. And here's the kicker, David didn't even need this house. High-paying job, fancy apartment. This wasn't about practicality. This was about control. I took a deep breath, stood up, and just said, "Okay." Dad seemed annoyed that I didn't argue. He told me I had until noon today to pack, then walked out without another word. I sat back down, staring at those papers. The anger came later, hot and sharp, making my hands shake. But right then, all I felt was a chilling cold. I didn't sleep a wink. I started packing, shoving clothes into trash bags, stacking boxes in the living room. Every creak of the floorboards, every car outside made my heart jump. I kept replaying Dad's words, you're a failure. It wasn't just the eviction. It was years of disappointment, comparisons, the unspoken message that I'd never be good enough. By morning, most of my life was piled by the door. The house felt eerily empty, like I was already a ghost. Then, tires crunched on the driveway. A car door slammed. Footsteps. The front door unlocked. David was here. I wiped my hands on my jeans, trying to steady myself. I expected a confrontation, a smug lecture. But as the door swung open, his expression shifted when he saw me. That's when I knew this was about to get interesting. David didn't even close the door. He just stood there, keys in hand, staring like I was a stray animal in his new property. That look on his face was pity mixed with superiority. "Well," he said finally, a little laugh escaping, "you're still here. Thought Dad told you to clear out last night." I couldn't speak. My throat was bone dry. My whole life was compressed into bags and boxes, stacked neatly. David's eyes immediately went to them. "Guess you actually listened for once," he said, almost surprised. "Good. This doesn't have to be ugly, Alex. You just, move out, figure yourself out. Maybe one day you'll thank me for the push." That was the first spark of real fire. Thank me? Like this was some grand favor. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my voice even. "This house was Mom's, too," I said. "Do you really think she'd want me thrown out like this?" David shrugged, already making himself at home. He tossed his jacket on the couch like he owned the place, which, technically, he did now. "Mom's not here, is she?" And Dad signed it over. "So," he trailed off with a smirk. "You can't keep living off him forever, Alex. You're 28. Most people have their own place by now." I clenched my jaw. Most people didn't have their father secretly sell the house out from under them to their older brother either. But saying it wouldn't change anything. And David knew it. He was reveling in this power shift. He walked around the living room, inspecting it, already imagining the changes. He stopped at the shelf where I kept old photos. Me and him as kids, all three of us with Mom before she passed. He picked one up. "You should probably take this with you," he said casually. "I'll be redecorating soon." That hit me harder than the eviction papers. The idea that he'd wipe away the last traces of Mom from this house. Wow. I started shaking my head. "You don't waste any time, do you?" David turned to me with that fake, calm smile. "Alex, this place needs a refresh. You've been stuck here like a ghost for years. It's time to let go. You can't hold on to the past forever." I wanted to tell him this house was more than walls. Every corner held memories that kept me grounded. But he wouldn't get it. To him, everything was about appearances, upgrades, moving forward. He never stayed still long enough to sit with loss, to feel grief like I had after Mom died. Instead, I just asked, "Did Dad tell you to say all this, or is this just you being yourself?" David's smile faltered. Then he shrugged. "Dad and I just want what's best for you. Look, you've been spinning your wheels. This is your chance to do something with your life. You should be grateful." Grateful. That word echoed like a bad joke. Grateful for being blindsided, for losing the only place that still felt like home. Grateful that my father and brother decided, without so much as a conversation, what was best for me. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You know, David, you've always had everything handed to you. Dad's support, the money, the attention, and now this house. Ever stop and wonder if maybe you didn't earn all of it?" He stiffened, jaw tightening. "You know what? I think you're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Jealous? I repeated. Of you? No, David. I'm just tired. Tired of being treated like the family disappointment just because I don't live my life exactly how Dad wants me to. Tired of being compared to you like we're in some competition I never agreed to. He rolled his eyes. Here we go. The victim's speech. That did it. I grabbed one of the boxes, hoisted it up, and marched past him to my car. If he wanted me gone, fine. I'd go. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I made several trips, loading my car while David lingered, occasionally calling out unhelpful comments like, "Don't scratch the walls," or, "Be careful with the door frame." He wasn't just watching me leave. He was reveling in it. At one point, I came back from my sketchbooks and saw him on the phone. "Yeah, I'll have the locks changed this afternoon," he said, glancing at me. Better to get it done before anything happens. That's when the anger boiled over into something sharper. He wasn't just pushing me out. He was erasing me from this house, from its history, like I'd never belonged. I took the last of my things and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around one last time. David was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Guess this is it," I said quietly. He didn't even look up. "Yeah, don't be a stranger." I almost said something then, something I'd regret, but instead, I just turned and left. My car was packed to the brim. My chest felt tight. As I drove away, I told myself I was done. Done trying to earn their approval. Done letting them dictate my life. But as the house shrank in my rearview mirror, a cold, steady thought crept in. If they thought I was just going to disappear quietly, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Driving away felt like leaving a piece of myself behind. I didn't have a plan, just a car stuffed with boxes and a head full of spinning thoughts. I ended up in a 24-hour diner parking lot on the edge of town, sitting there long after the engine was off. The sky was gray and heavy. My phone buzzed, but I didn't look. I just gripped the wheel until my hands stopped shaking. I didn't want to call anyone. Didn't want to explain or, worse, hear, well, it's their house. So, I drove again, aimlessly, until I pulled into a cheap storage facility. Within an hour, everything I owned was stacked in a concrete room. When I left, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Dad. "Turn in your house key today. No exceptions. No, how are you? No, let's talk." Just a command. I texted back one word, "Fine." That should have been the end. But a few hours later, dropping off the key, the betrayal hit me again. David and Robert were both there. Dad, arms crossed, the usual frown. David leaning against the counter, far too comfortable. Papers spread on the table. For a second, I thought maybe they'd reconsidered. Maybe they wanted to talk. But no. "Good. You're here," Dad said flatly. "We need to go over a few things before you leave." I stayed near the door, wary. "What things?" Dad gestured to the table. "Utilities, property taxes, insurance. You're still listed as secondary on some accounts because you've been living here. We want to make sure everything's transferred so there are no surprises." Sounds reasonable, right? Then David chimed in, a grin spreading. "And since you've been using Dad's internet and power, we thought it fair you cover the last few months' bills before you go." I blinked. Had I misheard? "Excuse me?" Dad nodded. "You've been living here rent-free, Alex. It's only right you settle what you owe. David's taking on the property now. He doesn't need to deal with back expenses." Back expenses, like I'd been freeloading. Like the countless repairs I'd done, the groceries I'd bought, the nights I'd kept this house running while Dad was away meant nothing. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice low. David slid a printed sheet across the table. "It's not that bad. A couple hundred for utilities, some upkeep costs." Dad covered. "Consider it a clean slate." I picked up the paper. My stomach dropped. Not a couple hundred, nearly $3,000. They wanted me to pay before I left, as if I was some deadbeat tenant. That's insane. I tossed the paper back. "I don't owe you a dime. I've been maintaining this place for years for free. I fixed the leaky roof last winter, replaced half the appliances, painted the entire downstairs." "And that was your choice," Dad interrupted sharply. "You chose to do those things instead of getting your life together. You can't expect me to reward you for staying stagnant." I laughed bitterly. "Reward me? You mean not throw me out on the street?" Dad's face hardened. "You have 12 hours. Pay what you owe or I'll consider it theft of services." Something cracked inside me. Not just anger, but something deeper. This wasn't about pushing me out anymore. This was about humiliation. They wanted me to leave broke, small, ashamed. I set the house key on the table slowly. "Here's your key," I said, my voice shaking. "That's all you're getting from me." David frowned, but Dad just shrugged. "Suit yourself. But don't come crawling back when you realize how hard the world is." I turned to leave, but David couldn't resist one last jab. "You know," he smirked, "once I finish the remodel, this place is going to be worth twice what Dad sold it to me for. Probably the best investment I've ever made. You really missed out." I stopped in the doorway, gripping the frame so hard my knuckles went white. He wanted me to react, to lash out. Instead, I just said quietly, "Good luck, David. Hope it was worth it." I walked out and didn't look back. But as soon as I was in the car, the tears came. Hot, angry, unstoppable. I wasn't crying because I'd lost the house. I was crying because I'd finally realized the truth. It wasn't just the house they didn't want me to have. It was a place in this family. I spent that night sleeping in my car outside the storage facility. I couldn't call friends, couldn't find a motel, just sat there under the hum of the streetlight, replaying everything. Dad's words, David's smug grin, the $3,000 bill. The way they looked at me like I was nothing. By morning, something had shifted. The hurt was still raw. But beneath it was a slow, simmering resolve. If they thought they'd broken me, they were wrong. If they thought I was just going to disappear quietly, they were really wrong. Then, just as I was about to start the car, my phone buzzed. A bank alert. I opened it. My stomach flipped. A withdrawal I didn't recognize. Nearly $1,200 gone from my checking account. I called the bank. The representative confirmed. The payment had gone through for shared household expenses, automatically debited from a joint account I'd been forced to share with Dad years ago. He'd used my own money to pay part of that bill they demanded. That was it. The breaking point. The last thread of trust snapped clean. When I hung up, I just gripped the steering wheel until the sun came up. The betrayal wasn't just complete. It was weaponized. And I knew right then, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rock bottom didn't hit me all at once. It crept in quietly. I left that bank parking lot feeling hollow, numb. The car smelled faintly of stale fast food. My life crammed into boxes. I drove aimlessly until I ended up at the river, just staring at the water. My childhood home gone. My dad's respect shattered. My brother, a stranger in a familiar face. And now they'd taken money straight from my account. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through job postings, but every listing felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. No stable address, no references, maybe even credit checks. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Eventually, I found the cheapest motel, a two-story place with flickering neon lights. The room smelled of bleach, but it had 4 walls, a bed, a shower. It was enough. That first night, I slept for almost 14 hours. My body felt like it had been through a war. My phone had more messages from Dad. You need to grow up. This is the real world. Take responsibility. I didn't reply. Instead, I showered, put on clean clothes, and forced myself to a cafe with free Wi-Fi. I spent the entire day researching property transfers, eviction rights, joint bank accounts. The legal jargon was dizzying, but I took notes slowly, starting to see cracks in what Robert and David had done. It wasn't much, just a faint glimmer of control, but it kept me from spiraling. Days blurred. Wake up, cafe, job applications, back to the motel, stare at the ceiling. Money was draining fast. My savings would cover a couple more weeks, maybe a month. Then came a truly humiliating moment. I ran into an old neighbor, a sweet woman who always waved. Alex, she smiled. I heard about the house. David mentioned you moved out. How are you holding up? There it was. David rewriting the story. I forced a smile. I'm okay. Just figuring things out. She patted my arm. Well, I'm glad David's finally getting a chance to make that house his own. He's so responsible, isn't he? Your dad must be proud. The words landed like a punch. I nodded, made an excuse, and left. Inside, I was boiling. They weren't just erasing me from the house. They were erasing me from the narrative. I was just the screw-up who left so the golden child could save the family home. Back at the motel, laptop open, notes spread out, I let myself think about what I really wanted. Part of me wanted to disappear, find a new life, never look back. It would be easier. But then I thought of David's smug grin, Dad's words, the stolen money. A different feeling rose up. Slow, steady, like coals catching fire. I started looking into more than just property law. Local business records, tax filings, even social media posts. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just that I needed to know everything about Dad, about David, about how that house deal went down. The more I read, the more pieces clicked, odd details about the sale, unusually fast processing, a transfer price that seemed lower than market value, and about that joint account. Legally, Dad wasn't supposed to use it without my consent now that I was an adult. That $1,200 withdrawal was disputable. For the first time since this started, I felt a tiny spark of control. The days were still hard, still rationing dollars, still sleeping on a lumpy mattress. But now I had a notebook full of plans, questions, documents to pull. Every time I thought about giving up, I'd picture David talking about changing the locks. I wasn't ready yet. Not even close. But I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was waiting, watching, gathering. Because if there was one thing I was sure of, it was this: they weren't going to get away with it forever. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, a call came that sent my plans into overdrive. A call that changed everything about how I saw my family, the house, and the betrayal. The call came late afternoon as I was packing up from the cafe. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, but something made me swipe to accept. Is this Christopher? A calm, professional voice asked. Yes, I said cautiously. This is Sarah from Graham and Company Title Services. We just wanted to confirm that you're no longer a secondary signer on the house transfer documents. Correct? I froze. Title Services. House transfer. Wait, I said slowly. Why would I have been a signer at all? There was a pause. Oh, I see. You weren't aware your name was still listed on the previous title. As an inheritor from your mother's estate. I gripped the table so hard my knuckles went white. No, I said, I definitely wasn't aware. Well, Sarah said carefully, it was removed during the transfer, but we're required to notify you as a courtesy. We sent a notice by mail. I almost laughed. Of course, to the house I'd just been thrown out of. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there, heart hammering. My name had been on the title. That meant Dad hadn't just sold his house. He'd sold our house. Mom's house. The house that was supposed to be passed down to both me and David. And he hadn't said a word. The anger that hit me then was different. Cold, sharp, focused. This wasn't just hurt feelings. This was real, legal. They had gone behind my back to cut me out of something I had a right to. That night, back at the motel, I didn't just take notes. I started making calls. First, a lawyer specializing in probate and inheritance disputes. I didn't have much money, but the consultation was free. I told him everything, the house, the sale, the eviction, the missing money. When I finished, there was a long silence. This doesn't sound right, he said. If your name was on the title, you should have been given the option to sign off or challenge the sale. The fact you weren't notified could give you grounds to contest the transfer. Contest it? I asked, sitting up straighter. Potentially reverse it, he said. I thanked him, set up an appointment, and hung up, feeling for the first time in weeks like the ground was steady beneath my feet. That was just the beginning. Over the next few days, things slowly shifted. I got a call back from a local design firm, junior graphic designer. Not glamorous, but enough to get me out of the motel. I aced the interview, got the job, and moved into a small, clean studio apartment. Within a week, I also disputed the $1,200 withdrawal. The bank put the funds on hold. Each small victory felt like stacking bricks, building something solid. I started going to the gym. Nothing crazy, just running, lifting. My reflection didn't look so beaten down anymore. Work became a kind of therapy. The team was welcoming, creative. They treated me like an equal. No comparisons, no subtle digs. I stayed late most nights because I wanted to. And as weeks passed, I saved money again. Opened a new bank account, separate from Dad. Watching the balance grow was like a lifeline. But I didn't forget. Every weekend, I met with the lawyer. We gathered documents, title histories, emails. He even got a copy of the sale agreement, which showed Dad sold it to David at a price far below market value. Combined with my lack of consent, that could look very suspicious in court. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about proving they were wrong. That I wasn't just some failure. The more I worked with the lawyer, the more confident I felt. I started posting my art online again, something I'd been too embarrassed to do before. To my surprise, people liked it. Commissions came in. One design went semi-viral. I felt like I was building something mine. Then one Saturday morning, I stopped by a coffee shop. There they were, Dad and David, sitting by the window. Alex. Dad called, his voice carrying. I hesitated, then walked over. You look good, Dad said, surprise in his voice. Heard you got a job. That's good. David just smirked. Finally growing up, huh? I smiled. A real smile. Yeah, I said. Actually, things are going really well. I didn't say more, but I saw David's smirk falter. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the kid who couldn't measure up. I felt like someone standing on equal ground, maybe even taller, because I knew something they didn't. The lawyer was nearly ready to file. The house wasn't just theirs to do with as they pleased. Soon they were going to find that out in a way they never saw coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one standing in the doorway, powerless. I'd be the one holding the papers. The real turning point came 2 weeks later. My lawyer called me into his office for a strategy session. I expected a routine update, more paperwork. But when I sat down, he had a look on his face. "I think we're ready," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Not just to contest the transfer. We can move to freeze any major renovations or sales David might try to make until this is resolved. And there's more." I dug into the financials. "Your dad underreported the property value by almost 40%. I frowned. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning," he said, a small smile playing on his lips, "that if we take this to court, not only can we argue your consent was required, but we can make the case that this sale was a fraudulent conveyance, an attempt to move assets unfairly. If the judge agrees, the sale could be voided entirely. The house would revert back to joint ownership between you and your father, the way it was before." My breath caught. For weeks, I'd prepared for the house being gone, hoping for a small settlement. But this meant the whole deal could be unwound. What would happen to David? I asked carefully. "Well," the lawyer leaned back, "if the sale is voided, any money he paid for the property would be refunded by your father. He'd no longer own the house. And if he's already made renovations, he might not get reimbursed for those. Essentially, he'd be back to square one." I sat there, staring at the folder. A slow, measured calm washed over me. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. This was setting the record straight. "Let's do it," I said. "File whatever you have to." The next few days were a blur of signatures, notarizations, filings. The lawyer moved quickly, getting an injunction to stop any major changes to the property until the case could be heard. I kept working, kept building my life. Commissions online picked up. One of my designs was featured on a popular art blog. I had 2 lives running in parallel, the stable one I was building, and the storm I was patiently preparing to unleash. Then came a stroke of luck that felt almost too perfect. One evening, I ran into Chloe, David's girlfriend, at the grocery store. She looked tired. "Hey," she said, managing a small smile. We made polite small talk until she sighed. "You know, David's driving himself crazy with that house. New floors, new kitchen, even talking about building a deck. He says it'll double in value by next year." I bit back a smile. If only he knew. Chloe hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Honestly, I don't even know why he's doing it. He doesn't plan to live there. He told me he's just going to flip it and use the profit for a down payment downtown." That was the missing puzzle piece. If David was banking on flipping it for profit, the injunction would hit him twice as hard. Not just emotionally, but financially. Every dollar he poured in would be locked in limbo. I thanked Chloe, keeping my tone neutral. The moment I got to my car, I called my lawyer. "Good timing," he said when I explained. "We can add that to our filing. Show that David's improvements are speculative and that you stand to lose financially if he's allowed to keep making changes unchecked." Each step felt like tightening a noose, not out of malice, but precision. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was in control. Even at work, people noticed. My boss called me in. "I don't know what's going on in your life, Alex, but you've been on fire lately. Your designs are sharper. You seem confident." I smiled. She was right. I felt taller, lighter. A part of me had woken up. A part that refused to be stepped on, ever again. A few weeks later, I got the court date. 2 months out. That night, I celebrated quietly. Takeout in my apartment, Mom's favorite song playing softly. I raised a glass of soda. I imagined the look on David's face when he got served. The way Dad's smug certainty would crack. But I didn't want to just blindside them. No, I wanted them to feel safe first, to think they'd really won. So, I started being polite when I ran into them. Civil, if Dad texted, I answered respectfully. If David called to brag about the remodel, I listened, offered a neutral, sounds good, and hung up. Let them think I'd accepted my lesson. Let them think I was finally playing the obedient son and brother. Because when the moment came, I wanted the ground to fall out from under them all at once. Then, everything in place, I got an email from the lawyer. This is it, the subject line read. I opened the PDF, my pulse quickening. This wasn't just paper. This was my voice. My chance to stand up and say, you don't get to erase me. I hit send on the signed version, leaned back, and felt something I hadn't felt since this all began. Peace. It wasn't over. But the pieces were on the board now. And for the first time, I wasn't just playing defense. I was the one setting the trap. The summons went out on a rainy Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, my phone started buzzing. First, David, then Dad, both leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Alex, what is this? David's voice snapped. You're suing us over the house. Are you out of your mind? I let it go to voicemail. 2 hours later, Dad called. You don't know what you're doing, son. These things cost money, time. You'll regret this. I didn't respond to that either. For weeks, I stayed silent, calm, while they stewed. I kept working, kept saving, kept getting stronger. I wasn't going to be baited into an argument that would give them any power over me. When the day of the preliminary hearing finally came, I arrived early. I wore my best button-down shirt, the one that actually fit me well now that I'd been taking care of myself. My lawyer met me at the courthouse steps. You ready? He asked. More than ready, I said. David and Dad arrived late, of course. Dad looked irritated, like this whole thing was beneath him. David looked smug, but with an edge of nervousness I hadn't seen before. When we sat down, the judge asked my lawyer to present first. He stood calm and professional, laying everything out in clear, sharp language, the original title with my name, the lack of proper notice, the sale below market value, the automatic withdrawal from my account. He showed the injunction we'd filed to halt renovations and explained that allowing David to continue would cause irreparable financial harm to me as a co-heir. Dad shifted uncomfortably when he heard co-heir. David turned to look at me, eyes wide for a second before quickly schooling his expression. Their lawyer stood next, arguing the sale was legal, that I had no right to interfere, but the judge cut him off. If what Mr. Graham is presenting is accurate, she said, glancing at the documents, then this court has serious concerns about how this sale was conducted. The case will proceed to a full hearing. She banged the gavel. Just like that, we were moving forward. Outside, David stormed up to me, face red. You can't do this, he hissed. Do you have any idea how much money I've put into that place? I looked him dead in the eye, calm as I'd ever been. Then I guess you should have thought about that before you kicked me out. Dad stepped forward, trying to intimidate me. You're tearing this family apart, Alex. I met his gaze evenly. No, I said quietly. You did that when you sold Mom's house behind my back. For a moment, Dad's expression faltered. A flicker of something. Then he turned away without another word. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing things through the grapevine. David had sunk almost all his savings into the remodel. New floors, new kitchen, custom deck. He'd even taken out a small loan, banking on flipping the house quickly. Now, thanks to the injunction, he couldn't rent it, sell it, or even finish some renovations. I didn't gloat outwardly. I kept my head down, kept working, kept building my case. But inside felt good. Not because he was suffering, but because for once the scales were balanced. For once, I wasn't the one paying the price for someone else's decisions. Then came the full hearing. The courtroom was bigger. This time, I took a deep breath. My lawyer presented our evidence: title history, mom's estate documents, lack of notice, undervalued sale price. He even brought in an expert witness who testified the price was far below market and bypassing my consent had directly harmed my share. Then it was Dad and David's turn. Their lawyer tried to argue I'd never contributed, that I'd freeloaded, but my lawyer was ready. We have bank statements showing Mr. Graham paid for repairs, utilities, and maintenance for years, he said, handing over documents. Not only was he contributing, but his contributions increased the property value that was later transferred without his consent. The judge listened, asking questions. Then, after what felt like hours, she finally spoke. This court finds sufficient grounds to void the sale of the property, she said. The house will revert to joint ownership between Mr. Graham and his father until a proper division can be arranged. Furthermore, any funds withdrawn from Mr. Graham's account without authorization are to be reimbursed in full. I sat there, stunned for a moment, the words sinking in. We'd done it. David's face went pale. Dad's jaw tightened. When we stepped out, David rounded on me. Do you have any idea what you've done? He shouted. I just lost months of work. Thousands of dollars. I looked at him steadily. You didn't lose it, I said. You just invested in something that isn't yours alone. Dad didn't say anything this time. He just stared at me. Something complicated in his expression. Anger, yes, but also something that almost looked like respect. I turned to leave, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders with every step. This wasn't the final chapter. Not yet. But the power dynamic had shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on my knees asking for scraps, and they knew it. The next move was mine. The weeks that followed the court's decision felt surreal. The house, now legally back under joint ownership, was frozen. David's grand flip plan, dead in the water. He couldn't sell, couldn't rent, couldn't even finish some work without my signature. I didn't rush. Part of me wanted to just let them stew, but I knew Dad would pressure me to sell my share for pennies, so I played it slow. The first time I went back to the house after the ruling, David was there, sitting at the island with a beer, looking exhausted. You happy now? He asked bitterly, not looking at me. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing. It didn't feel like home anymore, but it was still mine. Not really happy, I said. Just done letting you both decide what my life is worth. He slammed his beer down. You ruined me, Alex. I maxed out my savings, took out a loan. Now I can't even sell it. I'm stuck. I faced him, calm but firm. You're stuck because you tried to erase me from this house. You made a choice and you made it worse. By gloating while you kicked me out. Actions have consequences, David. Welcome to yours. He didn't say anything, just stared at the floor. Dad, on the other hand, called me later. His voice was tight. Your brother is under a lot of stress, he said. You've made your point. Why don't you agree to sell your share so we can put this behind us? Because my share is worth more now than it ever was, I said. And I'm not in a hurry. I want this done right, fairly. For the first time, there was a long pause. Then Dad said, You're not the same kid you used to be. No, I said. I'm not, and you don't get to treat me like him anymore. That conversation marked a shift I could feel in my bones. The next time we met, he wasn't towering over me. It was two equals at a table. He offered to buy out my share at fair market value, not the insulting family discount he would have tried 6 months ago. I agreed, but only after adding a clause. He had to reimburse me for every dollar taken from my account and for the repairs I'd funded over the years. When the check cleared, I put a down payment on my own condo. Small, yes, but bright and new and fully mine. The first night, I stood in the empty living room, playing Mom's favorite song, just letting it fill the space. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Word spread through the family. My aunt called, proud I'd stood up for myself. Even Grandma, who'd always favored David, called to say she thought Dad had been too harsh, and she was glad I'd fought back. As for David, he had to finish paying off that loan, eventually scraped together enough to buy out Dad's remaining share. By the time it was finally his, the market had dipped, and he ended up losing money on the sale a year later. I didn't gloat, but I won't pretend I didn't feel a small, quiet satisfaction knowing life had handed him the lesson he tried to hand me. The last time I saw them both together was at a family gathering months later. The tension was thick, but I didn't shrink. I walked in, shoulders squared, head high, wearing a new suit I'd bought with a bonus from a major design project. David just nodded stiffly. Dad gave me a long look. I hear you're doing well for yourself, he said. I am, I replied simply. Better than ever. And that was the truth. As dinner wound down, I stood, ready to leave. I looked at both of them. The father who had dismissed me as a failure. The brother who had treated me like a problem to be solved. And I felt no anger anymore. Just clarity. I want you both to know something, I said, my voice steady. What you did hurt me more than I can explain, but it also forced me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. You thought you were teaching me a lesson about responsibility. Turns out I learned one about self-respect. I turned and walked out, the room silent behind me. As I stepped into the cool night air, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anything to them. I didn't need to because they finally understood. I wasn't the one who'd been cut out of the family. They were the ones who'd lost me, and I was never coming back.